the cloud. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Climate in Crisis event at your favorite library, at the Howard County Library System. We are doing this in collaboration with Climate Reality Project, and we have two leaders with us, Dr. Sarah Baia and Mr. Agostino Schito. Welcome. As I already told you, we will be recording the class. You will be able to access it on our YouTube channel. On the bottom of the screen, you can see a live transcript. You can see us, and you can toggle it on and off. And Sarah, welcome. Sarah and Agostino.
Thank you.
Thank you for stopping by. Okay.
Yeah, so let's start with just a high-level description of what this program is. This is actually a monthly event that we have organized in collaboration with the library. And each month, we will go over this agenda format that we have on the screen right now, right? That describes today's event, but it will be very similar, will be the same format for all our monthly meetings. Our monthly meetings will go on for the next several months until January. And then, based on your feedback, which we would like to hear from you about, based on your feedback and interest, and maybe some subjects that you would like to hear more about, we can continue these, throughout the next year. But on a monthly basis, right, we will start our discussion. And it is a discussion. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your statement. So we will start with some news and clues. What is the latest information we have on our climate change situation? We will have a featured presentation, a specific subject. In this event, it will be about frequently asked questions, people asking about facts, science, and on the climate change. And then we will finish each one of these monthly events with a discussion about action and choices that we can make, right? So you'll see some of those today. And of course, all is open to a discussion. So next, we can introduce ourselves. I'll start. This is Agostino Schito. Good evening to all. As you probably can tell, from my name and maybe from my accent too, I am originally from Italy and lived about 15 plus years in Ellicott City with my family, some of which is actually participating. And so actually in 2019, together with my wife, I joined the Climate Reality Project, which is the sponsor of this event too. This is an organization that was founded by Vice President Al Gore in 2006, and has the mission to catalyze a global solution to the climate crisis by making urgent action a necessity, because this is really the subject of what we're going to present. We need to take action. In August of 2019, we were trained to become one of over 20,000 climate reality leaders that are working in more than 150 countries to provide education and raise awareness about the climate crisis. And this is where the collaboration with the library comes in. And in fact, in the past couple of years, in 2019 and 2020, I was a presenter to a previous event that was organized together with the library, where we presented the classical presentation from our Climate Reality Project. And then, I passed the mic to Dr. Sarah Baia, and which will lead us through the rest of our discussion today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sarah Baia. I'm a professor and climate extension specialist at University of Maryland in College Park. And I became a climate reality leader in 2013, which was really the part of my transformation from a research scientist. I spent 35 years doing evolutionary genetics research, and the business with climate extension specialist. That's my new job description. Extension is the part of every land grant university which reaches out to people in the state to teach adults science-based solutions to real problems. And so now my job is to, try to reach as many people in Maryland and beyond and help people learn more about climate change. So that's one reason I was so delighted when Agostino contacted me, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of this tonight's session and then future sessions as well. So now we're going to move to the news and clues section of the evening. And one of the biggest pieces of news that has come out about climate change in easily the last year, if not more, is the IPCC report. IPCC stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And they have produced a number of reports. They do these regularly, but they have not produced a report on the physical science basis of climate change for quite some years. This is a report that was produced by a large number of scientists across the globe. I think there are something like 245 different scientists who are authors on the various sections of this. And the IPCC in general, all of their reports have to be, everything in each report has to be agreed upon by all of the people writing it and a variety of people in each government. And so this tends to be a very conservative report because, you can't get everybody to agree on something that's going to be pretty fringe. So when this report was released on August 9th this year, along with a press release which described climate change now as code red for humanity, that really caught everyone's attention, because here we have this very conservative organization. They're not going to go out on a limb. When they say code red for humanity, they mean we are in a situation. And the press that came along with this echoed this sentiment. According to the American Academy for the Advancement of Science and their Science magazine, which is their flagship journal, climate change is unequivocal and unprecedented. The same, just the month before, right before this was released, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration revealed that July 2021 was the hottest month on record. Various articles have come out recently describing the increasing probability of record-shattering climate extremes. Here are some news items about the report: 6 takeaways about tropical cyclones, more intense, wetter, and windier in a warmer world. And we already know that hurricanes, that as we experience them on the East Coast, are becoming more severe, more category 3 and 4, more wind, more water, etc. Another aspect of the report is that no part of the globe will be spared. Pretty much every place is going to be affected by climate change. It is being affected already, but it will be more so as we carry on. I'm just going to point out this headline from the New York Times, which highlights the optimism in the report with all this sort of bad news. And there is a lot of bad news in there. The bottom line is there's still time for us to get this under control. So the New York Times says a hotter future is certain, climate panel warns, but how hot is up to us. And so that's what we're going to be working with as we carry on in this discussion. How hot is up to us? And that means we need to take responsibility along with other people for coming up with and going along with and embracing solutions to this problem. So what I'm going to do for the next little bit is to address some, fundamental questions about climate change. And as we go along, if you have any questions about what I'm saying, you could type them into the chat box. And as I go along, I'm going to try to remember after each one of the questions to pause, and Agostino can let me know if there are any questions. And then at the end, I am seriously hoping we will have time for a decent length discussion about all of these questions and other things that you are interested in with respect to climate change. So we're going to kick it off with one of the most common questions and one of the most common sources of confusion, which is, what is the difference between weather and climate? So weather versus climate. Weather is about what's happening outside today, tomorrow, next week, next month. It's very short term. Weather changes, as you know, it can change in a matter of hours. It can change in a matter of days. So weather is highly variable and it changes very rapidly. Weather is very local. So when we want a weather report, we don't really want it. If we live in Maryland, we don't really want a weather report for out here. We want a weather report for the weather that is affecting us. And one way that a lot of people describe the difference between weather and climate is weather is what you get out there, okay? Whereas climate, which is really varying over a long term, decades, not hours or days or even months, decades. Change in the climate is slow and it's very, very hard to detect as it occurs. And in fact, one of the reasons that a lot of people have trouble with climate, accepting that climate change is occurring, is because we live in the weather, okay? And the weather is all around us and we experience that weather every day and it is fluctuating all over the place. And we don't remember very well what the weather was like a month ago or a year ago. So we don't experience the climate, we experience the weather. Climate is regional. So here's a picture of the biggest picture of climatic zones, which are first of all determined by latitude. So we've got the tropics and the temperate zone and the polar zone. And then within each of these, we've got little sub areas that are determined by patterns of precipitation. So we don't need to go into that fine detail, but just to understand, the climate is regional. And so the climate today is what we expect to happen based on long-term average conditions. The weather is what does happen, okay? And there's a lot of things that make the weather highly variable on top of this underlying average trend called the climate. So do we have any questions about that? I'll just carry on unless Ago breaks in and says we have a question. Okay, how do we know the climate is changing? I said we have a very hard time experiencing it for ourselves. We have to look at long-term patterns in the data, in the measurements that have been taken for decades. And I'll show you some of those patterns. This is one of my favorite illustrations. It's a visualization from the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, the guys down there in Beltsville. And it stops at 2011, but I think it's a very compelling illustration of the variability of the weather first, and then the trends that are visible as the climate itself changes. I'll just orient you towards this map. The colors indicate the temperature, and it's expressed as a difference between whatever this is, 1884, and a baseline period between 1951 and 1980. So if a place on this map in 1884 is blue, it means it's cooler than it was during the 50s to 80s. If it's yellow or red, it means it's warmer than it was during that period. And I'd like to call your attention to two things. First of all, the climate does not change and the temperature does not change equally in every place, in sort of a monotonic or a gradual increase that's the same everywhere. You can see even in this 1 year, there's a lot of variability in different places and across the globe. The other thing is, if you watch a particular place like where we live, okay, you'll see that sometimes it's warmer, sometimes it's cooler, there's a lot of variability. And then in about the middle of the 1970s, you'll see that something different happens. And so I'll play it. It just takes 30 seconds. Each of these pictures is a year. Lots of variability going on. Okay, cools off a little bit in the 80s, or 90s, 2000. Okay, by 2011, you can see that there's very little blue on the map anymore. And you can see also that the northern hemisphere has warmed much more than the southern hemisphere, partially because there's more land in the northern hemisphere. But this is very worrying because the Arctic area is one of the fastest warming areas on the globe. And you know that they've got a lot of ice and everything up there, so that makes a big difference. Okay, so that is long-term data. Starting in 1884, the first year that we had any ability to measure global temperature, and then going every year till 2011. Now, let's extend this temperature, our sort of tour of the temperature. It's starting in 1860. These are data compiled by Berkeley Earth, but they're mostly governmental data. And what we see is that up until, really, it should be about here, about 1915, a little bit after 1900, the temperatures are bouncing around. Each red dot is 1 year global average temperature. The bars are how much variability there is between places. And then the line connects the dots, okay? So the dots go up and down, up and down. So there's some variability, even though the average is remaining fairly constant. Then we start to see an increase. There's a little blip here in the 40s where it's a little hotter than expected, and they know why that is. But then starting in the 70s, you can see that there is just really a relentless upward climb in average temperature. Again, it varies from year to year, but we're pretty much going up, 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 and this is accelerating. In fact, if you look at these little dots, if you had this in front of you at your leisure, you could see that 19 of the 20 hottest years on record, that is since the 1860s, 19 of the 20 hottest years have occurred since the year 2000. Just think about that. There have only been 20 years since the year 2000. 19 of them are record-breaking years. And I think by the time we rack up the temperature in 2021, which is likely to be a record breaker, that's going to knock this year, 1998, out of the running, and all 20 of the hottest years will have occurred since the year 2000. This should tell us something. This pattern could not occur by chance alone, okay? If it was just chance, we would just still be noodling around this line down here. This clear trend means something has happened to change things. Whoa, I don't know how that got on there. I don't usually do animations, but I already mentioned it's accelerating. I'm going to skip the ocean. Somehow this presentation, I use a template, and so it does not have my usual characteristics. So I want to go back here and just see, I had some other information. Okay, let's talk about the fact that in addition to the air warming, the oceans are warming. And the really shocking thing about the oceans warming is that they're warming all the way down to the bottom. 2,000 meters and more. So a meter is around 3 feet, right? So that means even 6,000 feet down in the ocean, it's warming up. And that's because the ocean has absorbed almost all, like 93% of the extra heat in the atmosphere. So we talk about global warming, but really it's ocean warming. All the extra heat in the atmosphere, 93% of it has been absorbed by the ocean. And that is causing a lot of very important and somewhat scary changes because increased warmth and the CO2 is being absorbed by the ocean, and that's making it more acid. So this is not a very good situation either. I want to just tell you about temperatures in the Northern Hemisphere. This is an update of a classic study that was done in 2010 or 2012 by James Hansen, who's a very prominent climate scientist who used to work at NASA. Now he's retired and he works at Columbia University. But what he did was he and his students got a big data set of the temperature of every day, the average temperature in the Northern Hemisphere of every day between 1951 and 1980. And they plotted those temperatures as a frequency histogram, okay? So they had the temperature of every day on there, and it piled up and made this distribution. So you're familiar with the bell-shaped curve. Most of the days had some average temperature, and they have just set the scale so that the average is at 0. And an equal number of days, about 30% of days, 33% of days are cooler than the average, about 33% are at the average, and 33% are greater than the average. And this green line is the sort of defines that distribution of the baseline temperatures in between 1951 and 1980. Now let's fast forward to 1990 to 2000. Now we see a different distribution. We still have that green line in the background, which shows us where we were in 1951 to 1980. But now this distribution has moved over to the right. So, and you can see it's more jagged because there aren't as many days in it as here. So it's more jagged, it's a little bit wider. There are still some days, not a full 33%, still some days that are at the same average temperature as back in the 51 to 80. Still some days that are cooler than the average in 1951 to 80. But now most of the days are warmer. And this is the most notable feature of this distribution. Now that curve has shifted so far to the right that there are some days which we're going to call extremely hot. They were really hardly visible in this distribution. Hardly ever did one of those days occur. 0.1% of the time we got a day as extreme as this back in the 50s. That means 1 in 1,000 days were basically summer days were that warm. Now 10% in 1990 to 2000, 10% of the days are that warm. That's a huge change. Now let's go to 2010 to 2020. That distribution have shifted more to the right. So these are actual temperatures that were compiled by Hansen and his team. And now we have a boatload of days over here in that extreme temperature category. And now we have some super extremes that were not even ever occurring in 1951. So now instead of 1/10 of 1%, 1 in 1,000, now 22% of days are this hot or hotter, okay? Previously unthinkably hot days are now commonplace. So this is alarming. Okay, so that just says what I just said, okay? We used to have it 1/10 of 1%, now they're 22%. Okay, so the changes in the global temperature, we have a warmer air, we have a warmer ocean, because remember the ocean is absorbing a lot of that extra warmth. Because the ocean is warmer, it's evaporating more water, and the air is warmer, so it's holding more water. So if that doesn't seem obvious to you, the relationship is like in the summer in Washington, it's very humid. It's warm and humid. There's a lot of water in the air. In the winter, it's not so humid because cold air can't hold so much water. So as the air has warmed up, it holds more water. So it's like 7 or 8% more humid now than it was in 1950. You probably can't recognize that, except that you're really uncomfortable in the summer when the humidity is high. We have a higher sea level because that warmer water takes up more space, and we've also had a lot of melting. And the warmer ocean and the warmer air together have caused changes in winds and in currents. So these pictures just illustrate some of the issues of the warmer ocean. Ocean heat is transferred to hurricanes and tropical storms as they're building up and provide more energy. So it's a picture of Hurricane Dorian barreling up here towards North Carolina over this very hot water. And a lot of the reason that hurricanes that are going up to Louisiana through the Gulf of Mexico intensify is the water's really hot here in this shallow area. And now in the Gulf of Mexico, it's hot all the way to the bottom. So that is increasing hurricanes. And this is this classic picture from 2017 when Hurricane Harvey blew in August 25th. Hurricane Irma came through a few days later, a week later. This is Hurricane Jose, never really did anything because it went over here, but we had other major hurricanes, Hurricane Irma, gigantic hurricane season. Harvey caused a lot of damage. And yet, okay, so there's some issues in the summer. This is a picture of my car outside my house. During that snow, I forget when it was actually, 2015, 2017, I remember, Snowmageddon, okay? We had 22 inches of snow at the beginning of March. And that was the year that the senator went to the floor of the Senate and threw the snowball and said, hey, what is this global warming stuff? It's snowing outside. Well, it turns out that increased cold weather and increased snow is actually a predicted part of climate change because the winds that circle the pole, this is the famous polar vortex, it used to whirl around here really tightly and keep that cold air up there. But now the winds are changing as I described because of changes in the temperatures in different latitudes. And now the jet stream is really weak and it wobbles around and it lets the cold air come zooming down the center and east coast. And it warms up over here in England, part of Europe. That's the predicted effect of climate change, colder winters in parts of North America. Climate change also causes both floods and droughts. So, any questions there?
We don't have questions in the chat.
Are there are or there are not?
No questions.
Okay. Now, so I've shown you some of the patterns of climate change, changes in temperature in both air and water. Now, how does this work? Why is this happening? And this is a picture that I modified from the Climate Reality Project that illustrates the famous greenhouse effect. And in fact, this one slide is all you need to understand to really get why climate change is happening. You don't need to know, it's really not rocket science, okay? It's all right on here. And so here's how it works. The sun shines down on the earth and warms it up, okay? That's obvious. Every day, well, you know, when the sun is shining, warms up the earth, and that heat is re-radiated back, some of it is re-radiated back into space. And it's a balance. Heat is generated by the sun, heat is lost through these infrared waves making their way through the atmosphere and out into space where, you know, there they are. In order for the Earth to stay the same temperature, you need to lose about as much heat as you gain, or otherwise you're going to either get warmer or cooler. So everything has been going along great, staying about the same temperature until after the Industrial Revolution. And at that point, and actually it was in the late 1800s that a British scientist figured out the greenhouse effect. Certain gases in the atmosphere wind up interfering with these infrared waves as they make their way through the atmosphere into space. So the atmosphere is a small place. This makes it look really big, but actually Carl Sagan described the atmosphere as the thickness of a layer of varnish on a basketball. So just think about that. Here's the Earth, it's a basketball, a thin, thin layer. And that is the business end of the sky for us. That's where all the air is, all the oxygen that we need, everything that we need. And that's where everything, all air pollution goes up into the sky. It doesn't go to space. It hangs out in the atmosphere in that little space. So these are the three main troublemaking gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And these gases interfere with the heat waves. So here comes an infrared wave, okay, making its way out into space, runs into a molecule of greenhouse gas, one of these greenhouse gases. And because of the molecular structure of these particular gases, how big they are relative to the wavelength, et cetera, they interfere with that infrared wave and they absorb it very briefly and then they bounce it off in some random direction. Okay, so instead of that thing just going through the atmosphere, it hits a molecule of greenhouse gas like this cartoon. Half the time, if it's random, half the time it'll come back towards Earth. Okay, here's one, hits a molecule, comes back towards Earth, hits another one, goes out. Here's one, comes back, noodles around, goes out. So this interference keeps those infrared waves in the atmosphere longer than they should be in there, right? They should be going right out into space. So here's how climate change works. The more of these greenhouse gas molecules we pump into the atmosphere, the slower the heat loss because those waves are bouncing around in there, okay? They're more bouncing around and the atmosphere warms up. That's it. Now it's really quite interesting. As many arguments as I've read denying the existence of climate change, I have never seen a single argument saying the greenhouse effect doesn't work. And that's because this is like physics and chemistry. You have an infrared wave, you've got a carbon dioxide molecule. This is what's going to happen if they collide. Boom. And that's why the air is warming up. Any questions on that?
Yes, well, there is a question and from Gabby. What kinds of data do scientists use to study the climate? And how have the data collection tools and techniques evolved to improve our understanding of our climate? And I think you have some of that coming up.
Yeah, that is sort of coming from over here right now. But scientists study the climate in many, many ways. I will describe a few ways as I go along. There are, of course, temperature measurement tools all over the globe. Scientists use satellite data to determine a lot of different things. And I'll talk about also how they use ice core data to determine what the climate was like hundreds of thousands of years ago. And of course, those rocket scientists down at NASA are always working, and they have a lot of very, very sophisticated tools. So the data is coming in all the time, and it's really excellent. And again, if one satellite reading is off, or one temperature gauge is off, or one tide gauge is off, that doesn't matter because there's so much information that, of course, there's going to be little things that happen, but those are washed out by the body of information that is documenting the same trend. And so there's a lot of, it's sort of like safety in numbers when it comes to data. The more you look and you see what's going on, the less that little variability that might occur because somebody dropped the sample or whatever. That doesn't matter anymore because you have so much other data. Does that answer your question? Yes, no, ask again if it didn't answer it. So how do we know that this rise in temperature that we saw, okay, we saw the video, we saw the graph, how do we know this isn't just a natural cycle of temperature? People say all the time, well, the climate is always changing, so this is no different. I remember my grandmother told me back in 1940, there was a big hurricane. And so, now we have 5 big hurricanes a year. So what? That's no different. Okay. How do we know this isn't a natural cycle? This is one of the best sort of compiled evidence that we have. What this graph shows you, first of all, here's the present, 0, time 0. And we're going to go back in time 800,000 years, okay? And scientists have ways of determining what the carbon dioxide level in the air was and what the temperature was way back 800,000 years ago, which is, of course, hundreds of thousand years before modern humans even evolved on the planet. So what you can see here is the carbon dioxide on the top in blue, up and down, up and down, up and down, sort of a regular cycle. And we know what causes that, okay? And these are the cycles that lead to the ice ages. And then we see that the temperature more or less follows, okay? This is air temperature. Remember, 93% of the extra heat in the atmosphere was absorbed by the ocean, okay? So there's a little bit of a lag here, but when we have the pit of temperature, that corresponds roughly to a low point of carbon dioxide, okay? Remember, I told you more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, warmer air, high carbon dioxide, warmer air, low carbon dioxide, cooler air, okay? So it's up and down, up and down. We understand what causes these cycles, okay? And we've known about that for a long time. No one is denying that climate change, that carbon dioxide and temperature have always gone up and down. But if we get up here to the present, what we see is a very rapid increase in carbon dioxide. And this arrow is supposed to be pointing over here. The maximum level of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere for 800,000 years was 300 parts per million, okay? 300 parts per million. Don't need to worry too much about those units, but just know that in 2020, the concentration was 413 parts per million. So in really about 150 years, the carbon dioxide concentration rocketed right out of the range of these natural oscillations up into way different territory, okay? And this is how we know that this is not a natural cycle, because this value is so far out of the range of variability that could be generated by this process. 800,000 years never got over 300. All of a sudden, boom, we're at 400 and over and still climbing. Something else had to have happened, okay? This process cannot explain that, okay? Scientists, in fact, say that it's fairly clear that 100%, all of the warming in the past 50 years has been due to human activities. So that's my next point. I want to say one other thing here, because I know all you guys are thinking, how do they know what the carbon dioxide level was 800,000 years ago? And I love this because it's just literally so cool. Down in the Antarctic, the ice is like 2 miles deep. And so scientists take big drilling core things, cylindrical drills, and drill down and bring up these giant cores of ice. And they can date how old each section of the core is using the same way they date fossils. And so they can go back here and they can get an 800,000-year-old ice cube, essentially. And you know how ice cubes have white in them? That's air, okay? And in fact, in that 800,000-year-old ice is a little sample of the air that was on Earth 800,000 years ago when the snow fell that eventually became that ice. And so they can find out the carbon dioxide concentration at any point along here. And in fact, we can use actual measurements of carbon dioxide now to calibrate this and ask, well, okay, how good is this ice measurement anyway? Well, it turns out if you use recent data where they also have measurements above Hawaii of actual carbon dioxide, it matches up perfectly. So we know that this is a good method, and we have faith that it goes back and is accurate way, way back there. So we know that this is too far out of the natural range to have been a natural thing. Okay. Now, here's the next clincher. How do we know that humans are responsible? Quite way over 50% of Americans accept that climate change is occurring now, but far fewer accept that humans are solely responsible. Many people think that it's due to natural cycles, which I just showed it isn't, but they're not. It's a little scary to think that humans have actually caused something so big, but there are data which illustrate a very tight connection between human activities and climate change. And this is one of those pictures. So this is amount of carbon dioxide produced, okay? It's millions of metric tons of carbon when you burn either coal, oil, or natural gas. And so group of people was able to go way back into the 1800s and determine how much coal was mined and how much was burned and et cetera. So they could figure out how much CO2 was liberated by burning coal from 18 whenever up until a little over 2000 or 2000. And so the top of this wedge is the amount of carbon dioxide or carbon liberated by burning coal. Then we're going to add to that the amount liberated by burning oil, which picked up, you know, the 1920s or something. And then, of course, got very big after 1950 when everyone started to drive cars. And then we're going to add carbon dioxide liberated by burning natural gas because we're piling that on top. And if we look at that curve, the total curve, after we've piled up all of these three things, the amount of carbon dioxide liberated by burning known quantities of these fossil fuels matches pretty close. I mean, I would say this is definitely close enough for government work it matches pretty close to what the observed carbon dioxide changes have been since, you know, the mid 1800s. So to me, this is the human fingerprint that says, hey, we did it, okay? And that's okay, because back here, we didn't know what was going to happen. Now, they did discover the greenhouse effect, so some people knew, but we really didn't know. But by about 1970, we knew what was going on, okay? All this time, scientists knew, okay? No one listened, but scientists knew. And it's just been unfolding after that time. Okay, any questions about natural range or humans are responsible? Okay, I'm just whipping along here. Now, let's ask, do scientists agree about climate change? If you read, you know, some of the news, you will sometimes see that scientists don't agree, or maybe you'll see a talk or article by some scientists who said this is all a bunch of hogwash. It turns out that there's only about 5 of those scientists, and the same ones come out all the time. And so when we ask, do scientists agree about climate change? The answer is absolutely, but most people don't realize it. It turns out that at least 97% of all scientists trained in something relevant to the climate, earth science or, you know, geology or whatever, 97% of scientists with relevant training say, yep, this is totally happening, and it's happening because of the greenhouse effect. This is a few years old now, but I don't think it's changed too much. Even though 97% of scientists say this is happening, only about 55% of the American public realizes this. Okay, this is part of, there's been a lot of incorrect information on the airwaves, let's put it like that. And people think that the scientists have not decided what is really going on. No, the scientists have totally decided what is going on. That IPCC report was reviewed by tens of thousands of scientists across the globe. We know what's going on. But when the public thinks the scientists are confused, they just, in the abstract, people are more likely to say, well, I don't need to do anything about this if the scientists don't even know what's going on. Okay, the scientists know what's going on. So that is not, a reason to not act. This is another graph from a paper by John Cook, who has been studying this consensus deal for a long time. This is just the number of peer-reviewed papers in the red, peer-reviewed scientific papers that have concluded that climate change is happening and it's caused by human activity. So this is, it goes from 0 to 500. So, in 2011, there were like 500 papers saying climate change is real, okay? If you look at this dark line sort of set of observations down here, very low, right? Less than 100, way less than probably 20, okay, maximum 10. These are the number of papers that disagree with the scientific consensus on climate change. Do scientists agree? Absolutely. No doubt about it. Okay. I want to talk about just a few common climate impacts. We are having more frequent and more severe floods, both on the coast from storm surge, like down here, and this is from rivers actually. We're getting more storm surge. We're getting tidal flooding, like in Annapolis, it floods very frequently because of high tide, essentially raises the sea level and it comes on land. We're getting a lot more inland flooding. Ellicott City, 2 quote 1,000-year floods in 2 years. A 1,000-year flood is not one that occurs once every 1,000 years. It is one that has a 0.1% chance of occurring in any year. And Ellicott City was really unlucky to get 2 of these in 2 years. Not impossible, obviously it happened. 2019, gigantic inland floods in the Midwest, washed out hundreds of thousands of acres of agriculture. This year, a lot of river flooding from the Midwest east, plus those unprecedented and incredibly damaging floods that they had in Germany earlier this year. Tidal flooding and inland flooding are increasing. Another part of what scientists call the new normal, that's these new conditions, hotter summers, increasingly hotter summers. On average, the US has changed 1.2 degrees centigrade since 1895. We've gone up, over 1 degree centigrade on average, but some areas are heating a lot faster. And this is a picture that was in the Washington Post earlier this year. Here's the scale. Some areas, here's the darkest red, have increased 2.5 degrees centigrade. Some areas have stayed cooler. This is a mountain range. These are the urban areas where it's really hard to stay cool, but different parts of the US and the world are warming at different rates depending on what's going on. This is a graphic from Climate Central predicting how many dangerous days with heat indices above 105 degrees we will see in Maryland. In 2000, we saw 8. In 2030, they're expecting 30. So I think we're at about 20 now, maybe 15. 2050, they're expecting 47. Heat index above 105 degrees is very dangerous because, as you know, the heat index is the combination of how hot it is and how humid it is, because the more humid it is, the less the body can cool itself by sweating and enjoying evaporative cooling. So heat index is very dangerous. So as the average temperature goes up, heat waves are more common. They're longer and they're more damaging because the heat index is also higher because of that extra 7% humidity in the air. There's more heat and there's more drought. And that means there's more fire, okay? And I'm sure, have all been keeping up with and reading about the catastrophic fires on the West Coast this year and in previous years, okay? The fires in California, et cetera, have been just terrible. They've had years of drought. They had a record-breaking drought for 10 years, which broke for a year or two, and now they're back in drought. And this is a picture of the drought rank since 1901 in last summer, middle of last summer, the drought rank. So if a place is dark like this, okay, it means that it was the driest it's ever been since 1901. Middle of the country here was wet. This part was dry, the West was dry. The West is even drier this year, okay? That means more fires. If you look at the data on how many acres are burned by wildfires in the West each year, the historic average is shown here in red. Fire season starts in May and starts to build up and peaks in August at about 0.6 billion acres and then declines. This is between 2001 and 2017. Fire season is starting in February, okay? Really going by March, really picks up in May and peaks way, way higher, peaks earlier and higher than it used to, and then declines. Fire season is at least 2 months longer now in the West than it used to be. And the fire service is spending most of its budget fighting fires. We've had record-breaking fires this year. This is one that occurred in July, the bootleg fire. The most recent one in the news, I think, has been maybe the Dixie fire. I can't remember the name of them. But when this was burning in the middle of July this year, it was only one of 80 fires burning in the West. And it was so hot, it was in Oregon. Here it is, okay? You can see it from a satellite, okay? It was so hot, it was generating its own weather. So this is like really unprecedented. Because the area was so dry, many of the trees were dead because of insect infestations, and all the dead wood is particularly dry because of the drought. So fire, big problem. New normal, basically outrageous weather this year. We've had so much outrageous weather that it's really hard to keep up with it. The beginning of the summer, we had this gigantic heat wave out in the West, where Seattle and Portland and places that don't get hot, right? They don't have air conditioning, they rarely get that hot, were way over 100. Lots of people died. I don't know exactly how many, but it was caused by this thing called a heat dome. Okay, so here's a map of the area. Here's the heat dome over the Northwest and part of Canada. And it's this wacky weather thing where high pressure pushes the hot air down, okay? And then it causes air to rise up, and then it pushes down again, and it just parks itself over an area, okay? And so it just stayed hot, hot, hot for a really, really long time. And then several different ones formed. Of course, that caused a lot of fires. Many areas with few or little ability to adapt to the heat are being hit with heat waves. People up here didn't have air conditioning. They really suffered, and many people died and got sick because of this hot weather. If you get 115-degree temperature in South Texas, well, people are a little bit more prepared for it down there, and they probably would not have had the same mortality. Okay, any questions so far? All right, what's going to happen in the future? This is a pair of graphs from the 4th National Climate Assessment in 2018, which is put out by 10 US federal agencies and describes the sort of state of the climate. And on the left, we have annual carbon emissions, and we have observed data going up basically about 2015 or 2016. And you can see that carbon emissions are increasing. These pathways in different colors are projected emissions pathways if people behave in different ways. If we do pretty much nothing, okay, as we have done so far, pretty much nothing, we stay on the same path, okay, exponentially increasing path. And by the way, this level of carbon dioxide is like 750 parts per million. Remember, we're at 413 now. This is not a good path to be on. We must get off this path, because if we go over here and we look at the temperatures predicted, if we stay on this path, the temperature change is predicted, and so the red line is the prediction, this sort of reddish cloud around the line, or space around the line, is the 95% confidence interval around this. That means they ran a bunch of models, and these models are very sophisticated and very accurate. And there are about 8 different outfits in the world that are running these climate models. And they all use different assumptions, and they pretty much all come out with the same thing. About 8.5 degrees Fahrenheit predicted, okay? But it could be hotter, could be cooler if we were really lucky, but it could be as much as 12 degrees, okay? This is our current path. 8.5 degrees hotter than it is, well, than it was in 1901. So that is about 6.5 degrees hotter than we are now, is really hot. If we think we have droughts, floods, fires, heat waves now, if we let this happen, we are really going to be in deep trouble, okay? Just deep trouble, that's all I can say. Our best chance is to get on this dark green pathway. Okay, this is the pathway that this particular one will lead us to a little under 2 degrees centigrade, okay, 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? That's this line here. And this is our best option, okay? We are not going back to the 1950s. We're not going back there. We are not staying the same, okay? It's going to get hotter than it is right now in the best situation, which means we can still choose the future we want, but one thing we can't choose is to go back to the past or to stay the way it is now. Not a choice. So we need to get on this low emissions pathway, and that's what is being debated now so hard in Congress as our current administration tries to do something. So we can still choose the future we want.
And it all depends on the actions, right? So we have 3 minutes left.
Okay.
There.
What can we do about it?
Well, hey, wanted to ask anybody about questions, but yes, let's also go to the action corner. We can display, what we recommend, right? As individual actions, we can talk about collective action, but it is clear, right? The message is clear that we have to move, right? We have to do something, and we have to do something very rapidly.
And we have to do a lot. We have to do a lot of different actions. There's no single action that's going to work. I made this slide for a different webinar, but these are the solutions that I think are most accessible to individuals in the US, okay? There's a lot of things we can't do. We can't make international regulations about methane on our own, okay? That's something that governments have to do. But we can do things as individuals. We can increase energy efficiency in our homes and do our best to conserve energy, don't use energy that we don't need to use. To reduce demand for energy, this is key. Because if we want to power our country on clean, renewable energy, it's going to be really hard to do it if we keep wasting a lot of energy as we are right now. So we need to reduce demand and then switch to clean, renewable energy to cover what's left. And some of you may not realize that you can actually go to your account at bge.com and you can request that your energy use be covered by clean, renewable energy. Most of it is wind, but some of it is solar. And you can do this at bge.com, or there are some other things you can do, community solar, et cetera. We'll talk about that at another time. It's really key in your vehicle to reduce the number of miles you travel. Vehicle miles traveled, VMT, in individual cars. So it's great if you can carpool, but one really easy way to do this is to just plan your trips, combine errands. So instead of going out, back, out, back, out, back, you just go out, you go to 5 different places, and then you come back. You'd save a ton of miles that way and a ton of time. Reduce food waste, this and this one, adopt a plant-based diet. These are the 2 big ones. Food waste and beef-based diets, meat-based diets are huge sources of emissions. And finally, I just want to say, support climate policy. This is where we get into trouble because everyone says, oh yeah, I really want to do something about climate change. But then when it comes down to maybe they have to pay something for it, or maybe they can't do something that they're used to doing, then they start saying, I don't want to do that. That's really not an option, people. We need to support big time climate policy, as some people are now arguing down in DC, even if it costs us, because everyone, all the economists now, all the big insurance companies are united on the idea that it is going to cost us a whole lot more if we do nothing. Of course, it's going to cost us something now to change to clean energy, to make everything energy efficient, et cetera. But the money we save on disasters and everything else will far outweigh the money that we have to spend. That is all I have to say. And I am happy to first just say what we're going to do next time. Agostino is going to talk about how do we get rid of carbon dioxide pollution. And
we'll touch base on some of these actions more in a little bit more details as we move along, as they are relevant to the subject that we discuss. So energy will be the discussion we'll have next month. We'll go a little bit in more details about those actions that we can all take.
How about any questions? Were there questions that you had that I didn't answer? I'd be happy to take a stab at them. You can just unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. That would be fine.
Yeah, we're over the time, but we're happy to stay with you.
I'll stay if
Right,
anybody has questions. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
And I apologize. I usually go over, and I'm sorry about that.
It was very interesting, Sarah, and thanks for sharing.
I crammed a ton of information in there.
That's right.
Reality is there's not such a thing as clean energy.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The reality is there is no such thing as clean energy. Every source of energy has its problems. The energy you generate from so-called clean energy has its energy expenditures. It's far more complicated than people realize. It's ludicrous to talk about biofuels because they generate more greenhouse gases than other sources. It's also a fact that you can't generate any source of energy without expending energy. So they're talking about clean energy is incorrect.
I think when we discuss clean energy, what we mean is energy that does not emit one or another of the greenhouse gases. You're quite correct.
Agriculture generates far more greenhouse gases than people realize.
What does?
Agriculture generates
far more. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And burning wood for energy does not, is not a big solution, because burning wood lets loose of a lot of particulates and a lot of air pollution. Yeah, there's no free lunch. There's no obviously simple thing, but solar and wind do not release any carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases. And that's why we call them clean energy. But they generate more energy than they use. They generate more energy than it takes to manufacture the windmill, or than to manufacture.
Use land.
Well, hey, there's no free lunch.
There are trade-offs, and people are ignoring those trade-offs.
I don't think that people are ignoring the trade-offs. People are aware that you don't get something for nothing, right? You have to spend energy and money and use minerals to make solar panels. You have to have land to put them on. But we know from various studies that, in fact, was it EPA, I think, it was one of the federal agencies, released a document showing where we could put solar panels that would not interfere with agricultural production. We can put them over car parks, over parking lots as carports. We can put them on rooftops. We can put them in marginal land. We can put them over landfills. So you're absolutely correct. That is a difficult problem with no simple answer, but there are answers. Okay, we don't have to just give up and go home. So I respectfully disagree with you. I'd be happy to continue this conversation if you want to email me about it, or email Agostino.
And next month, we'll talk exactly about these energy dilemma. What is that we're doing today, and what are the technologies and the solutions that we have available with what we know today, right? We can't predict what's going to happen 10 years from now. There could be another technology that comes up, but that's exactly what we discussed. And what is that we're trying to say is that not taking action, it's not an option. We have to do what we can do, even with the limitations, as you're saying, that nothing is perfect, but it's better than what we're doing. And so we have to take the action that we can today, not waiting another 10 years or 20 years to discover a new solution.
I do agree with you that it's important to understand the trade-offs. And for example, I am 100% against doing stuff that in the geoengineering frame, where people send various compounds up into the sky to change the reflective nature of the sky. We don't know how that works. We don't want to do things if we don't know how they work. Okay, that's super important. And so grasping onto something and saying this is a solution, if we don't know how it works, we don't want to do that. But we do have solutions that we understand. and we understand the trade-offs, and they will work to reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So, any other questions?
I think in
You
the meantime, we
wanna
have
hear
a
from
link
you.
to a survey, Zinaida, that you posted.
Yes, I posted a link to the survey. If you'd like to rate us, please do. Please go ahead. If you have any suggestions or questions, let us know. And I think Sara and Agostino will give us a link to the presentation that we will send to everybody who registered for the class. And thank you very much for attending. And thank you, Sara, and thank you, Agostino, for such a wonderful presentation. And hopefully,
And we're still here. You know, if there are any questions, please let us know. You know, there'll be a follow-up, and then, as we said, you know, in a month, on October 19th, we'll have another discussion. And also, we want to know if there are subjects that you are interested in. So let us know if there are subjects that you're interested in, and we can incorporate those into some of our next presentations.
I put my email up there. Agostino, you can if you want also. I hope that you will feel free to email me anytime. If you have a question or you didn't agree with something that I said, or you would like some more information, just send me an email. And I'm cranking up my website, which currently has a bunch of videos to my various webinars that I've given, but we'll also have many resources, climate related resources on there. So I would love to see you on there too.
So we thank you very much for spending part of your evening with us today, and we hope to see you a month from now. And please send us your feedback, questions, and suggestions.
thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks and good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.